Welcome to 2.2 Conditional Statements. Our objectives today are to identify, write, and analyze the truth value of conditional statements. And we will write the inverse, converse, and contrapositive of a conditional statement. So first off, let's talk about conditional statements. So a conditional statement is just what we've been saying. If this happens, then this happens. If P, then Q. And these are just letters to kind of help us figure out what goes where when we manipulate them later on. So if P, then Q. The hypothesis is the first part of it, the P. So if this happens, so you're making a prediction, the hypothesis, then this happens. That would be the conclusion, the afterthought. Think of a conclusion of a book as always at the end. So you got your hypothesis and you've got your conclusion, which would be Q. So we're going to look at these. These are already in conditional statements. You got your if-then statements. We're going to identify the hypothesis and the conclusion of each. So if today is Thanksgiving Day, then today is Thursday. So first we need to identify the hypothesis. If today is Thursday, that's our hypothesis. We're not going to include the if, we're just going to start with today. Today is Thanksgiving Day. That is my hypothesis. And I'll write hypo for hypothesis. Now let's find our conclusion. Then today is Thursday. We're not going to include the then. We're going to start at today and we're going to go all the way to Thursday. Today is Thursday would be the conclusion. So our hypothesis is today is Thursday, today is Thanksgiving Day. Our conclusion is today is Thursday. Now let's look at our next one. This one is a little bit backwards. Look for the key word. So a number is a rational number if it is an integer. So for our hypothesis, it's usually at the beginning, but in this case, it is not. We're going to look for the word if, and I see the word if right here. So if what? If it is an integer, that would be my hypothesis. And you can imagine a then right here, a then. So if it is it would be a number. If a number is an integer, then the number is a rational number, and that would be our conclusion. So you're just looking for those keywords. If something is your hypothesis, then something is your conclusion. Okay, so if P, then Q can also be written as if P, Q. You don't need to write the then, or you can write Q if P, like that last one. There's different ways of writing it. You might see that happen, but just look for those keywords. There's usually the word if. And that's what I just said right there. Let's look at this guy again. So this one has no if and thens. We're going to create the if and then statement. We're going to write the conditional statement here. So we need to identify where our hypothesis is and where our conclusion is, and we're going to be able to derive it from that. So an obtuse triangle has exactly one obtuse angle. Okay. So it looks like we're starting with an obtuse triangle. That would probably be my hypothesis. And we're going to end up with having exactly one obtuse angle. So you got your hypo and you've got your conclusion. We need to create the if-then statement from this. I'm going to start with the word if. So if what? What is our object? What are we talking about here? We're talking about a triangle. So if a triangle, okay, think of English here. If a triangle, what's the triangle doing? Oh, okay. So if a triangle is obtuse, because we're talking about an obtuse triangle. So if a triangle is obtuse, there we go. There's my hypothesis so far. Now let's start our conclusion. Then what? Then it, because we're talking about the triangle, or you could say the triangle, then it what? Has exactly one obtuse angle. And now we have the if-then statement. If a triangle is obtuse, then it has exactly one obtuse angle. Good job. Let's look at this next one. Take a moment and see if you can write this one, creating an if-then statement from the sentence. Just pause the video now and give it a go. Okay, let's go through. Let's find out where our hypothesis is first. So you got two angles that are complementary are acute. So we're probably going to start with two angles that are complementary, and we're going to end up with them being acute. So we're talking about what? Angles. So if two angles, because we're talking about two of them, so if two angles what? What are they doing? It looks like they're complementary. So if two angles are complementary, then what would be our then statement? Then they, looks like I underlined the word acute, so they are acute. Perfect. Did you get that one right? Good job if you did. You can watch this video a few times if you're getting confused. This is a confusing section, and that's okay. Sometimes it takes a few more times to listen to get there. Now let's talk about truth value. So when you say a statement, you want to tell whether or not it's actually true or it's false. Usually when it's false, you can prove it false by doing a counterexample, just like we did before. Say, well, it's wrong because this could happen. Okay, so I could say, if the sky is blue, then it is not raining. Well, that could be true, but what if the sky is blue and it is raining? Because sometimes that does happen. That would be my counterexample. Now let's look at this one. It's already in an if-then statement. If this month is August, then the next month is September. Is that true or is that false? Well, knowing the months of the year, usually you go from July, August, September, October. Oh, it looks like September is right after August. So this is going to be true. So unless somebody goes and rewrites the months, that is true. So we don't have to do anything to that. It's just true. Let's look at our next one. If two angles are acute, and remember acute means they're small, then they are congruent. Congruent means they're the same. Well, I can think of two angles that are acute. Maybe like a 20-degree angle and a 20-degree angle, and those are congruent. But are there any two angles that are acute and not congruent? Are they always going to be matching? I don't think they will. I think this is false. Now I need my counterexample. I need to prove it wrong. So I'm going to draw an acute angle, and I'm going to draw another acute angle. Now remember, acute angles are anywhere between 0 degrees and 90 degrees. So I've got quite a range there. So let's say that this one is 10 degrees, and let's say that this one is 30 degrees. Are those both acute? Yes, they are. Are they congruent? No, they are not. So that would be my answer, and this is my counterexample. So for this, if the hypothesis is false, the conditional statement is true regardless of the truth value of the conclusion. So if you start out with a false statement, the whole thing is just true. Okay, so it's like today is opposite day. That kind of like that thinking. So in this, we're going to start manipulating some stuff here. So the negation of a statement is written as not P. So think of the negative version. You can take something and make it not. So the negation, that's just a little bit of terminology here as we get into rewriting this, okay? And here are some different ways we're going to be writing these conditional statements. I'm throwing it all at you at first here, and then we're going to go through and do each one individually, so that way you can understand how each one works. So first we have our original, if P, then Q. The converse, not like the shoes, the converse is you flip them. So if Q, then P. You start with a conclusion, and then you end with the hypothesis. The inverse is the original, but negated. So if it's not P, then it's not Q. The contrapositive is the converse, but negated. So if it's not Q, then it's not P. And I'll show you what those look like in written form here. So we are going to take this example here. I'm going to write the converse, the inverse, and the contrapositive. All those that I showed you, we're going to go through each one. So this is our statement here. If an animal is a cat, then it has 4 paws. Okay, and then we're going to find the truth value of each item. So first, we're going to write the converse. Okay, so if an animal is a cat, then it has 4 paws. That's my original. Now the converse is we're going to flip those two. We're going to flip the conclusion and the hypothesis. So we're going to start with the word if. If, what's my conclusion? If it, and don't write it, you want to say what your noun is. Think of what you learned in English before. You usually start with a noun. You need to identify what you're talking about. So what was it? It's an animal. Okay, so if an animal, if I can spell, there we go. If an animal has 4 paws, then, now we're going to take our hypothesis, then I can use the word it. Then it is a cat. Now it also wants us to check the truth value in this. Is this true? So if you have an animal with 4 paws, is it a cat? Well, there's other animals with 4 paws. Last I checked, there's dogs, there's iguanas, there's chinchillas, there's all kinds of animals. So there are other animals that have 4 paws that are not cats, so it's false. Now let's figure out what our inverse is. So here's our original again. If an animal is a cat, then it has 4 paws. We're going to take that original and we're going to make it the not version. We're going to negate it. So if an animal is not a cat, see, I'm just putting the word not in there, then what do you think I'm going to do to the conclusion here? Then it's not. Or I could say that better. Proper English. Then it doesn't have 4 paws. It doesn't have 4 paws. So what we did here is we just took the original and we just made it not, the not version. Okay, so is that true? If an animal is not a cat, does it not have 4 paws? Well, think about that for a minute. So there are animals that are not cats that have 4 paws, so the inverse is false. Okay, so it could not be a cat and be a different animal and still have 4 paws. So if it's not a cat, let's say it was a chinchilla, does it still have 4 paws? Yeah, it doesn't not have 4 paws. Okay, so we can't conclude that it doesn't have 4 paws. Now let's figure out our contrapositive. We're going to flip them and we're going to negate them. Okay, this one's a little bit trickier. So we're going to start with our if. So if our conclusion, so if, what are we talking about? We're talking about an animal. If an animal what? Has 4 paws. Now, remember, we're also going to negate this. So where would my not go? If not an animal? No, it would go right by my verb here, okay? So if an animal doesn't have 4 paws, then it, and don't forget your not, then it's not a cat. So is that true? So if an animal doesn't have 4 paws, so imagine an animal that doesn't have 4 paws. It's not a cat, right? So that would be true. That's true. Cats have to have 4 paws. So if the animal doesn't have 4 paws, of course it's not going to be a cat. If it was a cat, that would be a strange cat. Okay, and that's all of them. Good job.